In this episode, we're going to talk about what do you do if you feel like your kid's just not that smart? Maybe they're struggling in school in some way. And are they really not that smart? Or is there something bigger that we're all missing? Let's get into it. If you think being a dad is filled with rewards, challenges, or headaches, and you keep pushing forward because you know this is the most important job you're ever going to do, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dad's All In podcast. Welcome to the Dad's All In podcast. I hope you're doing well. I hope your family is great. And I'm just glad you're here, my friend. Today we're going to talk about what do you do if you've got concerns that your child might not be smart? Specifically, is your child smart? Or is it something that you're just conjuring up yourself or worried about on your own? I'm going to dive into that and talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned as an educator through many years and share some of the things that I actually share with my college students that might shed a little bit of light on this for you as a dad. Before I jump into all that, though, I want to give you a quick bit of information that might be important. If you follow me on social media, you know that my handle has always been @RechargedFamily, and that's actually my media company. But I am actually going all in on the Dad's All In podcast, and I am making this my sole focus. So some things are working through the process of getting changed. So if you look for me @RechargedFamily on whatever social platform you like to do your socialing on, and you find that I'm not there, then just try @dadsallinpodcast as the handle and see if that works. Essentially, over the next few months, my goal is to transition everything over, and that's all because I'm making some changes in my media company. You probably don't know this, but I've had multiple podcasts, and I'm closing up one that's been near and dear to my heart that I've been doing for about 5 years now. So I actually started podcasting coming out of COVID because I felt bad for educators, and they were burnt out with all the craziness that was happening throughout education. And in general, education can be crazy. It's easy to get burnt out. So I created a podcast that was focused on what I could do to help educators get better, but also help them stay the best that they can be so they could be the best for the students in the classrooms. So I'm actually wrapping that up. I've gone through and done some of the things on the business side because I had a long-time sponsor with that podcast. And so I'm scaling all that down. And I actually had another podcast that was family related, helping parents who had kids with challenges. I'm wrapping all those things up and trying to finish those things out. And my focus is going to be this one, heading forward. It's something I've thought about for quite some time. I'm super passionate about trying to help dads be the best versions of themselves. And that's all because of all my years working in education and being a coach and being a mentor to the kids that I worked with. And so many of them telling me that they wish their dads played a more significant role in their lives. I had a lot of students and players and mentees that didn't have a dad that was in their lives at all. And some of them said they wish their dad could just show up more often. And so that's been heavy on my heart for a long time. And usually what I do is find something that I'm concerned about and try to find a way that I can help. I think what you would find is my wife and I, our family in general, we're not people who just stand on the sidelines and complain about everything without taking action. And so this podcast has actually come from that. Whether or not I get a huge number of downloads or views on my YouTube channel, I'm plowing forward because I'm hoping that this content that I provide is going to hit and resonate with some dads out there who need to hear the message. So one more time, if you're following me @RechargedFamily, just know at some point in the next couple months that could change to @dadsallinpodcast, and that change has already happened on Instagram, but I'm also going to look to do that on TikTok and probably move towards rebuilding my Facebook page at some point in the near future as well. Feel free to look at some clips that I provide out there on any of those socials. And speaking of @dadsallinpodcast, that is my handle on YouTube as well. So on one hand, I'm really excited about the work that lies ahead to continue to provide you more content. On the other hand, I'm a little sad because I put some blood, sweat, and tears into my previous podcasts. And my educators, one in particular, has been going through the greatest months of its entirety in the 5 years that I've been doing it. By far got the best numbers this year than I had in previous years. And so it is difficult to walk away from it. But I also know there's a lot of other good people out there in education land who are helping out and can fill that void. But for dads, I don't think there's enough of us out there that are trying to share messages that are important. And if you don't know already, my message is pretty simple. As fathers, we need to be active, we need to be present, we need to support our kids, and we need to be the best role models we can be. That's my mission, to help you do that. My mission is to help myself do that. Sometimes I will put out an episode and listen to it again because I want to remind myself of what I'm saying too, because we are not perfect. We try to fail forward, learn with a growth mindset, and keep getting better. So today's topic has come about because of some things that some people in my life have said recently, and I wanted to explore it. And it's actually the same message that I gave my college students. I wouldn't expect you to know this, and I'm not going to go way into the weeds and geek out about what I'm about to share with you, but I do want you to know what I'm going to share with you isn't just something off the top of my head, just like off the cuff. There's something called Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And it is a theory that was created many, many years ago with the idea that intelligence comes in a wide variety of ways. I've recently had multiple people say that they aren't smart. And as somebody who struggled mightily in school, not just with my behaviors, which I did sometimes, but also academically, I totally get that. I have said that to myself I don't know how many times, and I still fight that battle. But just because I failed chemistry in high school, or just because I barely squirted through algebra, turns out doesn't mean that I'm not smart. Intelligence comes in a wide variety of packages. So if you're out there thinking, my kid is not smart, they're struggling in reading, they're struggling in math, they're struggling in whatever it is that they're working on, it does not mean that they're not an intelligent human, because there is nobody on the face of the earth who is great at everything. Just 2 days ago, I went and took my car through to get an oil change at this local shop. And I sat there in amazement with these young men who were going through this checkout procedure with me, and how intelligent they sounded when it came to the ins and outs of cars. So I have no idea if these guys were great in the classroom or not, but I can tell you, when it came to knowing their stuff about cars, you better believe they knew their stuff. They were sharp. They were smart. And this is where I'm headed today. Intelligence comes in a wide variety of packages, in much more than just what your kid is going to do at school. We get hung up on everything that happens at school. And yes, it's important for your kids to work at things they do well, and also the areas that they don't do so well in. But there's nobody who is going to be great at all the things that are happening, including all the different subjects at school. So if I took those guys who I could tell you were very intelligent when it came to the ins and outs of mechanics, and I plunked them down in a, college physics class, they're probably not going to feel that intelligent. And vice versa. If you take a professor who works in chemistry and you plunk him down in a garage, and if he doesn't have a love and a background knowledge of working on engines, he's not going to feel that intelligent. We spend all our time thinking about, is my kid smart enough? Are they smart enough to do this? Are they smart enough to do that? And if they're not, is there something wrong with them? We ask ourselves all these questions, right? But the answer is everybody struggles with things. It's just how it works. You're not going to be great at everything. Your kids, your son, your daughter, they're not going to be great at everything. So what do you do? Well, the answer is pretty simple, but it's also pretty complex. The answer is you keep working on the things that they need to get better at. But don't forget that they've got some strength areas, and every kid has them. And you continue to help them grow in those strength areas, because it's going to be those strength areas that help them build confidence. So in case you don't know, I was an elementary school teacher for 20 years until I worked in a wider capacity for an entire school district. And during those 20 years, my focus, my niche, and it still continues to be, like my specialty area, is helping kids with challenges. And a lot of that stems from the fact that I was a kid with challenges. And so I have a little bit extra insight on it. But what I can tell you is getting kids to be able to grow and continue to get better stems from confidence. And how do you work on things that you're not great at if you're not confident? Well, it takes some real willpower, number one. It takes perseverance. But I can tell you from all my experiences, majority of kids will not want to continue to work on things they don't do well at. And that's not just kids, that's us in general. We all feel that way. If it's something you don't feel like you're good at, you usually stop doing it. However, you don't have a choice when you're a kid at school. And you also don't have a choice maybe if it's a kid who's employed and they're working on a job. Or in athletics, here's a good example. When I was coaching at the high school level, we had some pretty dynamic teams. We were a team that we won a lot of conferences, and I coached high school boys and girls, and really fortunate to do that for many, many years. And would always have players who were petrified to use their off foot. If they're right-footed, they don't want to touch the ball with their left. If they're left-footed, they want to touch the ball with their right. There were some kids that would openly recognize, I'm horrible with my left foot, coach, and they would continue to work on getting better. And then there's some that would not want to kick a ball with their left foot or their off foot, and they would avoid it like the plague. And that's pretty common for people in general. If you struggle with reading and you know you struggle with it, you run in the other direction. I've always struggled with reading. I was in remedial classes for reading. That's not something that I was outwardly going to share with others, and it certainly wasn't something that I was outwardly going to say, I'm not good at, and I'm just going to keep working at it till I get better. Usually, the opposite is what happens. I'm not good at it, and I'm going to run away from it, and I'm not going to do it at all. So back to the simple answer, it is continue to help your kids work on the skills that they need to get better at. But that's not as easy as it sounds because they're not going to want to do it. You really have to be sensitive to that fact, and you got to work on building them up. Just telling them, work harder, work harder, work harder, that's not a recipe for success. Will some kids respond to that? Sure. Most will not, though. It kind of goes back to my main philosophy on working with kids. You got to know them. You have to know the ins and outs of your child's brain and how they tick. And I'll tell you, the majority of kids do not respond to, you're just going to do this because you need to work harder at it. There are some, but most will not. So you have to be creative about it. So let's say, for example, your child is struggling in math. Does that mean that they're not smart? No. It means they're struggling in math. They might be amazing at writing. They might be incredible at science, but struggling with math, which means you've got to help them find a way to continue to work on getting better at it. So I said this whole topic was prompted by a couple things. I think of a couple people in my life recently who have said that they're not smart. One in particular is like genius level at certain things in their life, but they won't give themselves any credit and they won't necessarily think, hey, I'm really good at this. Instead, they focus on the areas that they feel like they're not great at. And I think that's pretty common. I think a lot of us do that. I'll use my father-in-law as an example, who is also somebody who struggled mightily growing up in school, and he found the military. And because of it, it was like an amazing restart for his life that he desperately needed. He went on to be a sergeant in the Air Force and eventually went on to work with commercial airlines. And he will always say, I'm not smart. My response, yeah, you are, man. Yeah, you are. If I need something done in my house that I don't know how to do, my wife and I will contact him. He is our first call. He can do so many different things, like a genius level handyman. That doesn't always show up in writing. It doesn't always show up maybe in reading. But what is interesting about him in particular is, like myself, he struggled in reading, but he became a reader over time. See, there's some people who understand, you know what, I'm not great at this, but let me keep working at it. Keep working at it. You got to play the long game. If there's stuff that your child is struggling with, understand improvement is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And in many cases, when we talk about getting better at something and building confidence, we got to make sure we build their confidence so that they're willing to attack the things that they know they're not great at. That's how it works. If I'm feeling confident that I can do this pretty well, at least I've got some things I'm doing all right, then maybe I can have enough self-esteem, self-confidence to tackle the things that I know aren't great and I can understand it's going to take me a long time to work through that and get better. So it is definitely a marathon when it comes to self-improvement. The other thing I'll tell you is development happens at different phases. In elementary school, for example, your kid is in first, second, third, fourth grade, but that doesn't mean by the end of first grade, they're going to know everything that they need to know to be successful for second grade. Boys in particular, they don't have the language ability yet because their brains haven't developed enough to be as successful in writing as the girls will be. There are plenty of boys. It's an individual brain who are great writers right from the jump in kindergarten, in first grade, and second grade. But I'm telling you, overall, girls are far more descriptive, and that translates well to writing. But you know what? That doesn't mean that your child, if they're struggling in writing right now, will struggle with writing for the rest of their life. I've struggled with writing, and all these things that I struggled with in school, the light bulb for me really didn't go on till years later. And I was never really successful until I got to college. And I started to figure out some things about myself. So back to the overall theme here. It's that if your kid is struggling with something, we'll say academic related, because that's what we usually think of when we're talking about, somebody being smart with something. Understand them getting better at it isn't just going to fix itself in the next couple weeks. It's a long game, and you got to keep supporting them. And you got to also understand internally, whether they tell you this or not, they're tearing themselves up probably. As somebody who struggled with reading, I did not go out of my way to tell people that I struggled with reading. Matter of fact, part of my behavior issues was because I didn't want anybody to know that I was struggling with stuff. Instead, I'd crack jokes. I'd do anything I could do so I could avoid being in that spotlight. So have some sensitivity about it and understand you're going to need to work with your child, work with your teenager, work with your kid so that they feel more confident in themselves. And once they start to feel more confident, they can start to grind through some of the things that are tough. Now, intelligence comes in a variety of different packages. Like I said, you could be a mechanic and be amazing at it. You could be a genius in that area. You could also be great in athletics. You could be great at music. You could be great at working with other people. And those aren't always things that are going to show up in a grade book at school. But if you can build enough confidence so your child, your teenager, they work on these skills and they get better and they feel better about themselves, then maybe they'll be more willing to work on things that are challenging for themselves during school. So is your child smart? Yeah. It just might not show up in a grade book all the time. So you've got to make sure that you drive home this message. Intelligence comes in a wide variety of ways. You do not need to be a college professor to be smart. You don't have to be an astrophysicist to be smart. Being great at hitting a hanging curveball, that's intelligence. Being able to play some complicated riffs on the guitar, that is intelligence. It comes in a wide variety of packages. So we just keep understanding what we're great at and help your kid continue to grow in that area that they're strong at and start to pump them up and support them in the things that they need to do better at and give them grace and understand accelerating growth isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But if your kid has a village behind them that loves them and knows that they're always going to be there for them to support them through the process, it's going to be an easier road to hoe. And they're also going to be less fearful of making mistakes. I'm going to finish up on this one last quick story that happened way back my second year teaching. So this would have been back in 2000. I've been in education for a long time. And I was teaching fifth grade at the time. And I had this amazing kid. We'll call him Jeff. And Jeff, what I now know, that I didn't know then, was struggling with dyslexia. And I know that because he was a very intelligent kid, but just could not read. It was almost painful how much he was struggling with reading. However, he was very gifted at math. And he was also very gifted in anything mechanically driven. At the very first parent-teacher conference, his parents told me this story about how they had this old beat-up truck that was in the backyard out by the edge of their property line. And no one had tried to start it in ages. And the last time anybody tried, they couldn't get it running. And one day out of the blue, their 10-year-old son said, "Hey, Dad, could I go out and take a look at that truck?" And he said, "Yeah, here's the keys. Go ahead." And 30 minutes later, Father heard this sound from the backyard. It was the engine firing up. It's because Jeff was a genius at the ins and outs of understanding things mechanically. It's also why if I had a pencil sharpener break in the class or something that needed to be fixed, Jeff was my go-to, and he would take things apart and he would rebuild it, and he was amazing at it. You know what he struggled with though? Reading and writing. That did not mean that he wasn't intelligent though, because that kid's intelligence level was off the Richter scale. Just doesn't always show up in academic areas all the time. So I hope you can get a little bit from that. As somebody who has often thought of himself as not intelligent through most of his life, it wasn't until I was in college when I was like, I do have some strength areas. I'm pretty good at working with kids. I'm pretty good at building people up and motivating them. None of that stuff shows up in a grade book. So I just got to keep working on the things that I know I need to get better at, and eventually those strengths will help me out. And it did, because I became a teacher, and I became a coach. I became a mentee, and I worked with thousands of kids through the years, spending time supporting them and building them up so that they can feel like they can tackle things in their lives too. So as a dad, that's the message. Your kid is smart. And if you feel like they're struggling in academic areas, support them in that process for the long haul, not just for a week. And speaking of a week, I hope you and your family have an amazing week, and I will see you right back here next week. Have a great one. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for sticking around. If you got any questions you want answered on the show, or you just want some feedback or want to share some ideas, shoot me an email, dadsallinpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a DM on any of the socials @rechargedfamily. Thanks for listening.